Member for West Vancouver Sea to Sky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week I explored the lack of a science basis for the federal government's ill-informed decision to curtail recreation fishing for Chinook around Howe Sound in the South Coast during the 2020 season. The concern remains that this restriction will be repeated again this year, despite Chinook stocks being virtually absent during this Chinook fishing prohibition. What is not absent, however, Mr. Speaker, is the overwhelming presence of pinnipeds. Seals and sea lions have been hunted by First Nations for millennium and others since contact. However, since the 1970s, they have been protected. According to Rob Bison, fisheries stock assessment biologist with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, pinniped populations in the Strait of Georgia have increased from in the 1970s less than 10,000 animals to more than 80,000 animals today. Over that same period, Chinook and coho salmon populations have had a converse trajectory, with smolt survival during transition to open ocean appearing to be tremendously affected. According to Carl Walters, Professor Emeritus at UBC's Institute for Oceans and Fisheries, quote, most of the drop in survival of Chinook and coho in Georgia Strait since the 1980s is likely due to seals eating juvenile fish during their first summer in the ocean, unquote. Estimates suggest that seals may be consuming 5 million juvenile coho each year, or about half the area's annual juvenile population. Up to 15 million Chinook juveniles meet the same fate, or about a third of that juvenile population. In terms of returning spawners, any recreational fisher among you will have the experience with pinnipeds when you have a fish on your line. While freshwater conditions, ocean conditions, and marine competition for feed are very relevant, Mr. Speaker, pinniped predation is by far the most impactful variable on the survival of Chinook and coho from smolts to spawners. Predator management for critically endangered prey species, while difficult to embrace, must be given serious consideration as a tool by DFO as we collectively support the survival of resident orcas and the traditional salmon culture of British Columbia's First Nations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.